But thank you so much for everyone joining us today for this Learning and Growing webinar, An Effective Way of Teaching Comparative Advantage. My name is Sydney Smith, and I'm an educational courseware representative here at Hawks Learning. And our presenter today is Dr. Ying Zhen of Wesleyan College. Dr. Zhen is an associate professor of business and economics, and she is the economics program director of Wesleyan College. We will have a live Q&A session after this presentation, so please enter any questions you may have into the Q&A at the bottom of your screen as we go. And now I will go ahead and hand it over to our presenter.
Okay, thank you, Sydney. Thanks for having me. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. This is Ying. I'm Associate Professor of Business and Economics at Wesleyan College, although Sydney introduced me just now. Today, I'm very happy to just share my teaching experience on teaching comparative advantage. So I'm sure every econ person knows this very well, and this is a very, very, very fundamental concept in economics. If you have taken any economics courses, I'm sure you must have seen it at the very beginning of any economics intro level textbook, and you probably learned this concept in the second week or even first week in any of your intro level economics class. So this is a very basic, very fundamental concept in economics, but it's very powerful. It's a very powerful concept. This concept is based on another very, very basic and powerful concept, which is opportunity cost. I'm sure if you have taken any economics courses, you must have learned it. And I guess everyone still remembers that, or at least heard of that opportunity cost. So comparative advantage, let's look at its definition. The ability of an individual, a firm, or a country to produce a good or service at a lower opportunity cost than competitors. What does this mean, right? I'm sure everyone may still have a basic understanding. And as I said, this is a very, very fundamental concept in economics. Unfortunately, this concept is not easy to understand. It's not very easy to understand. There is a very classic paper, only 4 pages long, by Krugman. If I remember correctly, the title is What Undergraduates Need to Know About Trade. I really love that paper. So in my upper level undergraduate class, I think it's a 300 level in our institution, Econ 302, International Trade. I always assign this paper to students at the beginning of the semester because I want to make them aware of this fact that right, comparative advantage, although it's a very easy concept, very basic, it always appears at the beginning of any intro level economics textbook. Unfortunately, even lots of experts, pundits, they don't really understand. And so if you're interested, I strongly encourage you to read Krugman 1993 paper, What Undergraduates Need to Know About a Trade. I think it's a very humorous paper, and he just argued about this fact and also attacked those experts because they made wrong statements on TV, in newspaper. They got people just misunderstand the real basis of trade, which is comparative advantage. Yeah, so since this is a very popular issue in teaching economics. Today, I'd like to just share with you my way of teaching this concept. And the reason I'd like to share with you on teaching this topic is that I found most economics textbooks, for intro level, they just directly bring students to comparative advantage when it comes to trade, when it comes to international trade. So students have to accept that comparative advantage is the real basis of trade, and absolute advantage is not, right? So as a professor, I always saw students confusing faces. Why we have to accept that? Because this concept, right, although it's very basic, it's very fundamental, it's not that easy to really understand. Otherwise, Krugman would not attack those experts, right? So because we care about opportunity cost, but why this is the real basis of trade, why we have to accept it, especially as an undergraduate, especially in their first year or second year of college, why they have to accept comparative advantage as the real basis of trade. So, so for me, my way is to show students how the international trade theories evolve over time. Yeah, so what I believe that if I share all the stories about the international trade theories to students and just start from pretty beginning and then just gradually move to comparative advantage, and students will find it much easier to understand and also have a solid grasp of comparative advantage. And what's more important is that they would be more interested and confident and passionate in learning this powerful concept instead of passively accepting comparative advantage as the real basis of trade. Yeah. So I always made this lecture as an introduction of history of international trade theories. And I always start with introducing mercantilism, because mercantilism is a very, very old philosophy. Yeah. So mercantilism was the philosophy that guided European thinking about international trade in the several centuries, even well before Adam Smith, who published his Wealth of Nations in 1776. So I always reminded students that, right, at the very beginning of any intro-level economics class, we would explore the invisible hand theory, also very basic, which is about the price mechanism. Basically, if there is a shortage, the market will adjust itself. So sellers would raise the price, and then fewer people would be able to afford it. Then eventually, shortage would disappear. And I always compare shortage with scarcity, because shortage is temporary, while scarcity is permanent. And on the other hand, if there is a surplus, and then the market will adjust itself as well. So sellers would reduce the price while more people are able to consume the product. So eventually surplus will also disappear. So market can adjust itself. So it is like there is an invisible hand. Yeah, it's this easy. So mercantilism was the philosophy before Adam Smith published his Wealth of Nations in 1776. And then I showed students the main points of mercantilism. So mercantilists viewed that international trade as a source of major benefits to a nation. Merchants engaged in trade, especially those selling exports. Yeah, therefore, we have the name mercantilism. Yeah, so mercantilism, yeah, promotes exports and it discourages imports. The idea is very, very straightforward because, yeah, mercantilists believe that accumulation of gold and silver would improve the well-being of an economy. Therefore, exports are viewed as good, while imports are viewed as bad. Just like, so they encourage an economy to sell, yeah, instead of to purchase from foreign countries. Because if an economy buys more from foreign countries, then it sells its products to foreign countries. This would result in a flow of gold and silver to this economy, and this results in a greater accumulation of gold and silver, and this will benefit the economy. So the idea is very simple. So that you want to sell more to others than buying from them. So this will benefit you. Yeah. Yeah, therefore, yeah, so simply put, in other words, if a country exports more to foreign buyers than foreigners sell to the country, then the foreigners have to pay for the excess of their purchases by shipping gold and silver to the country. The gain in gold and silver increases the country's well-being. Therefore, yeah, exports are encouraged, while imports are undesirable. Yeah, and according to mercantilists, trade is a zero-sum game, because if you ship gold and silver to another country, and then the other country would gain this amount, and for this country, it will lose the same amount. Therefore, positive plus negative. So they just offset with each other. Then we get a zero. Just like you maybe send. Let's say you send $5 to a friend, and then you would lose $5, and then your friend would gain $5. Then -5 plus +5, and then the sum is zero. Yeah. So this is what mercantilists believe. So trade is a zero-sum activity. Yeah, so although this is a very, very old philosophy, and today countries no longer focus on piling up gold and silver, mercantilist thinking is still very much alive today. So that's why we often hear experts, right, making some confusing or even wrong statements on TV. And this is what Krugman 1993 paper attacked. Yeah, because now we still have many neo-mercantilists, and their focus is on employment. So they believe that exports are good because they create jobs in the country, while imports are bad because they take jobs from the country and give them to foreigners. And those neo-mercantilists continue to depict trade as a zero-sum activity. And mercantilist thinking, though misguided, still pervades discussions of international trade in countries all over the world. So I can see there might be questions. I may take a quick look. Okay. Okay. So, so Adam Smith just attacked the mercantilist thinking. So let's take a look. Yeah, so he believes that mercantilism lowered a country's standard of living. And the importance of national production and exports is only indirect, because they just provide income to buy products to consume. So why is that? Because we have to be very clear-minded. Actually, the consumption determines a country's well-being instead of like how much you can sell to other countries, right? So you may think about if you make like $1 million a year, but you are like super frugal, you spend very little, and then the standard of living is still very low. Yeah, so you have to basically consume, and then you will gain utility and happiness from the products you have purchased. So therefore, consumption is the key to the well-being of a country. So this is very important. So although we are not at comparative advantage yet, so we should just show students a complete picture, because we will have a very long example. So in any textbook, there would be a very long example. So students often get confused because there are so many steps, they could easily forget what they are doing. Yeah, so why we have to emphasize consumption level here is that we have to lay a foundation for the comparative advantage example. So the point is to compare the consumption level before and after trade. So in this comparative advantage example. So I'm sure every econ instructor must have heard of it, right? Must have, you know, like have seen this example maybe in a different context, but the idea is the same. So before trade, what would each country produce and consume? So that is the autarky situation. And then even one country has an absolute advantage, right? Should they, I mean, even one country has an absolute advantage in producing both. Should they still trade? So this would be a move from absolute advantage to comparative advantage. So in this long example, we will still let the countries trade and then see what will happen. So we will let them specialize and then produce according to their comparative advantage. And then the last step is to compare with their consumption level before trade. So the point is to compare the consumption level. Yeah, so that's why here, for Adam Smith's view, so it argued that mercantilism lowered a country's standard of living because they emphasize exports. They encourage exports and they discourage imports. So this would actually lower a country's standard of living. And of course, exports are important, but its function is only indirect. The idea is that you cannot always just buy without making money. So the exports will help provide the income to buy the products to consume. Yeah, so at least he emphasized the importance of consumption. And he advocated free international trade. So trade is a positive sum activity. Why is that? So he gave us a very simple example where he emphasized advantages of specialization and international division of labor, whereby nations specialize in the production of only a few goods. Yeah, so this this example is also very easy for students to follow. So basically here we have country A and country B. They both produce soybeans and textiles. And those numbers in the table show how many labor hours required to produce 1 unit. Yeah, so I always remind students the meanings of those numbers. They are not like how many units each country can produce soybeans or textiles. Instead, they are how many labor hours are required to produce 1 unit of soybeans or produce 1 unit of textiles. Okay. So the idea is very simple. So I let students just tell which country is more productive in producing soybeans or textiles, because they could easily tell from how many labor hours are needed to produce 1 unit. So they can give the answers very quickly. And then I would introduce absolute advantage, because it's very straightforward. Using the same amount of resources, who could produce more. Yeah. So after they figure out which country has an absolute advantage in producing soybeans and which country has an absolute advantage in producing textiles, and then we will let both countries specialize. But I always remember students that they will have specialization gradually, so not right away. So we will have a partial specialization. We will let them gradually be there. Therefore, after students answered that country A has an absolute advantage in producing soybeans, while B has an absolute advantage in producing textiles, then we will just let A gradually specialize in soybeans. So what A will do is that A will reduce producing textiles by 1 unit, and then A will free up 6 labor hours, and then A will spend the 6 labor hours to produce soybeans. And then how many pounds of soybeans country A could produce? That's why we can see such trade-off. Yeah, so A just reduces producing textiles by 1 unit, and then A is able to produce 2 units of soybeans. So it's very easy, just use 6 divided by 3, then we get 2. And similarly, we will let B specialize gradually. So B will start by reducing its production of soybeans by 1 unit. Then B will free up 12 hours of labor, and then B will spend the 12 hours of labor on producing textiles. And then B can produce 12 divided by 4, which is 3 units of textiles. So we can also see such trade-offs, right? And then overall, so here you could mention that this is a model. Models are simplified versions of reality. So there are only 2 countries in the world. That's our assumption. And then we can see that there would be a gain in production of soybeans. There would be another gain in production of textiles. Yeah, so it's a win-win game. Output will increase. Yeah, so students could easily understand this, and then we are pretty much ready for introducing comparative advantage. So just now I saw a comment. Yeah, so I would respect your view, but different instructors may have different strategies. Yeah, and back then I just started. The point is to show a complete picture of trade theory to students. So I wasn't at comparative advantage yet. And that's why, we will gradually move it there. So students would be interested, and also they want to know why this is the real basis of trade, why comparative advantage is the real basis of trade, instead of just just passively accept it. So now we are very ready for introducing comparative advantage as the real basis of trade. Yeah. So here it looks like everything, is like perfect already, and looks like we have solved the problem. So mercantilism is not the real basis of trade, right? It's not ideal. It's not really correct. Yeah. So we emphasize specialization, but this is not the end of the story. What if one country has an absolute advantage in both goods? Yeah, because here we can see country A has its absolute advantage in producing soybeans. Country B has its absolute advantage in producing textiles, right? So then what if one country has an absolute advantage in producing both? Then according to Adam Smith's theory, where absolute advantage is the real basis of trade, so then the two countries should not trade. So whether this is true or not, right? So now I think now is time to introduce comparative advantage, because it's not the end of the story yet. Yeah, and then if you're also using Harvard and O'Brien, you may see this example. So although it has been modified, right, the idea is the same. So here we can see these numbers, but here in this table, these numbers show the productivities directly. So basically by using 1,000 hours of work, how many computers and how many iPhones can each country produce? So they directly tell us the productivities. Therefore, we can directly tell US has an absolute advantage in producing computers. And at the same time, US has an absolute advantage in producing iPhones, because it produces more than China by using the same amount of resources, 1,000 hours of work. Yeah, so that's why as an instructor, we should always remind students what we are doing now, right? So step by step. Yeah, it's easy to teach. You can rush through. You can immediately teach comparative advantage, but students can easily get lost. Then what's the point of teaching, right? So just divide this thing into simple pieces, gradually move there, and then students will really enjoy learning the materials, and they will clearly understand what they are doing in each step. So basically, this is an issue. Yeah, so when one country has an absolute advantage in producing both, yeah, then according to Adam Smith, they should not trade. But whether this is true or not, right? Then we introduce comparative advantage. Comparative advantage basically we compare the sacrifice. Yeah, whose sacrifice is lower in producing the same thing? So even though, like this example, US is more productive than China in producing both, but in terms of sacrifice, so we will let both countries produce one computer and then see how many iPhones each country has to give up. And at the same time, we will compare their sacrifice when producing one iPhone. When both countries produce one iPhone, then how many computers each country has to give up. So this is a very powerful way of thinking. And I always hope this could influence the students' decision-making in their daily life. And this is the point of education. They should apply what they have learned to the real world. And in this way, students can really understand why this concept is that powerful, because we compare their sacrifice. Yeah. So the first step is to calculate the opportunity cost. And based on my teaching experience, a lot of students still struggle with this concept. What do we mean by opportunity costs? Simply put, the value of the second best choice. Also easier said than having a very clear understanding. So here I always remind students that there are only two choices for each country, to produce. Because this is a model, so either computers or iPhones. So when we look at the sacrifice of producing one computer, we have to use the units of iPhones each country has to give up in order to measure the opportunity cost of producing one computer. So basically those terminologies, they could easily get students confused, but once we just explain in this way, like how many iPhones each countries have to give up in order to produce one computer, and the amount of iPhones that have to be given up measures the opportunity cost of producing one computer. So I just believe that we need to make things very, very clear. Then students will feel very, very comfortable to move on and to have a clear understanding of this concept. And then I showed them the 3 steps. Again, very easy to get lost. What we need to do is to compare the consumption levels before and after trade. So if we still let the 2 countries trade, although one party has an absolute advantage in producing both, right? If they could both consume more after trade, then trade should happen. So consumption level is the key, and this is a great point from Adam Smith. So that's why we need to give students a complete picture instead of directly introducing comparative advantage. So I start from here, the autarky situation, and I would emphasize, both consumption points are on their PPF, and I will show them the simple math to demonstrate. And then I will remind them the second step is production according to their comparative advantage. And this is a complete specialization. This is different from that partial specialization, because this is, we can see that, right? US only produces computers, China only produces iPhones, but this is a complete specialization because we want to compare the consumption level. We want to know the end result. So we just assume they will have a complete specialization. And then here we can see, so Hubbard and O'Brien just directly provides a trade agreement, which is US exports 1,500 computers for 1,500 iPhones from China. So it's like 1 for 1. Here actually, it has several important points behind it. First is that we have to make students aware that the terms of trade is the ratio of value of exports over the value of imports. So it's value over value. So here is just number, the quantity over quantity. So here we have a hidden assumption, which is the price of a computer is equal to the price of iPhone. So for simplicity, we can use their quantities. So this is basically a 1 for 1 trade. So the terms of trade is equal to 1. Okay, but the textbook, I'm sure many other textbooks as well, because I also refer to other textbooks while preparing my classes. So a lot of them just directly provided such a terms of trade. And then, of course, when we figure out their consumption levels after trade, we can easily see, okay, it works, right? So we compare. So here I used different colors so students can easily see, okay, computers more than before. Well, iPhones stay the same for the US. The consumption levels. And for China, we can see computers consumption levels are the same, while iPhones, more iPhones than autarky situation, right? So students may think, okay, it's very easy. So we just assume any trade agreement, and then we do the simple math, and then we can conclude that comparative advantage is the real basis of trade, because we allowed the two countries trade according to after their specialization on the good for which they have a comparative advantage. But here there are still at least two important points behind it. So we need to make students aware that we cannot randomly assume terms of trade. So this is just an example, and this happens to work, right? This is provided by the textbook. But in their homework, sometimes the questions would ask the students to give their own example of terms of trade. How many units of good A or how many units of good B? So we have to make sure that their ratio, their terms of trade, that ratio, so here like computers over iPhones, this ratio should lie between the two opportunity costs. So this ratio is 1. 1 is between 0.5 and 2. So that would work, right? You could come up with other terms of ratio, but you cannot say, how about like 1 iPhone for 3 computers? So now the terms of trade would be beyond their opportunity costs. So this wouldn't work. The reason is very simple, because if we assume that, okay, 1 iPhone for 3 computers, then US will not agree to trade. So the point is that we need to assume a terms of ratio, how many units of good A or how many units of good B, assuming their prices are the same. Then we directly use their numbers. We should assume their ratio lie between the two opportunity costs. Yeah, so I always emphasize this to my students. Yeah, and the other thing is that, so I keep emphasizing comparing consumption level, because consumption would really determine the well-being of an economy. Yeah, also for individuals as well. So I explained why. If you make a lot of money, especially now, it's just a digital sign for most parts, right? Yeah, so so consumption is what really mattered. Yeah. So I can see Carol raised hand. Yeah, I can take questions. Feel free.
Yes, so if anyone has any questions at all, you can actually enter those into the Q&A since you aren't able to speak out loud as an attendee. So please enter those into the Q&A and we will read those aloud for Dr. Zen to answer.
Okay, thank you. That would work as well. Yeah. Yeah. So therefore, yeah. So here, in summary, so now, right, the basis for trade is comparative advantage, not absolute advantage, and because they can consume more after trade. And also, just now, I think I forgot to mention one more important point. I always emphasize to students. So it's possible for one party to have an absolute advantage in producing both, such as this example, but it's impossible for one party to have a comparative advantage in producing both. Why? Yeah, because we just look at their opportunity costs, right? So one is the reciprocal of the other, or the inverse of the other. So if you have a lower number here, you must have a higher number here, right? So it's impossible for one party to have a lower opportunity cost in both. So in other words, you can not have a comparative advantage in both. And an extreme situation is that maybe might be neither country has a comparative advantage if their trade-offs are equal. So no comparative advantage, therefore no trade. But it's impossible for one party to have a comparative advantage in both. Yeah, so it's just very natural to reach such important points and to make students aware of them. So that's why I'd like to share my teaching experience on this simple topic. And at the end, I just borrow some slides from another class. So in our institution is a general education class, Women and Economic Development. So just to enrich students' understanding, although I always remind students that this is also a model. And this model is based on the traditional division of labor. So nowadays, the situation has changed significantly. But this model assumes that, right, like men are working outside, women stay home, right? So and in the past, right, they were very different. They had very different productivities in the two sectors. Therefore, marriage is like a trade. So it's the same model, right? But models are simplified versions of reality. But I just included such materials here to enrich their understanding and also to stimulate their interest. And also here you can see when things are changing over time, right? We see divorce rate increases. Why? Yeah. Because of lower specialization, because more women have entered the labor force, and right, and they and also more women are working full time. Yeah, so this would stimulate students' thinking as well, and also to deepen their understanding of comparative advantage. Okay, so I think that's all for my presentation. And again, I welcome all the questions, and I also welcome different views. Okay.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Zen, for that wonderful presentation. I would like to apologize as well. Sometimes we can't control everything that comes into the chat, unfortunately, but I know that we all thoroughly enjoyed that wonderful presentation on comparative advantage. And so if anyone does have any questions at all, please feel free to enter those into the Q&A, and I will go ahead and read those aloud. We did have one question come in from Carol that asked, what ratio were you referring to that needs to fall between the opportunity costs?
Okay, thank you, Carol. That's a good question. So the ratio is, okay, is the terms of trade. Yeah, so for example, here, the Hubbard and O'Brien just directly provided this trade agreement. So 1,500 computers for 1,500 iPhones. So the ratio is the terms of trade. Terms of trade is defined as the value of exports over the value of imports. The value of exports over the value of imports. So it's the same as the trade agreement. So how much of good A for how much of good B, because this is more accurate, as it does make sense if we compare like maybe 5 oranges with 100 horses. If we divide their numbers, that doesn't make any sense. But if we divide their ratio, their values, and then we can tell, right, how much of good A for how much of good B. So here, the textbook just directly provided a quantity trade agreement. Therefore, we have to assume that the value of a computer is equal to the price of a computer is equal to the price of an iPhone, and then we can take the ratio. So for the U.S. Terms of trade is 1,500 because it's U.S. exports, 1,500 over 1,500. Yeah, 1,500 of computers, the price, we assumed that they are equal. So 1,500 over 1,500, which is equal to 1. And this happens to work because this will make both countries be willing to trade. So 1,500 over 1,500 is equal to 1. 1 is between 0.5 and 2. Yeah, 1 is between 0.5 and 2. Yeah, but if you come up with a different terms of trade, so say maybe like 4,500 computers for 1,500 iPhones. So it's 3 for 1. So the ratio is 3. 3 lies outside of the opportunity costs. Yeah, so I think, yeah, I just let students summarize like this. So make sure that the terms of trade lies between the 2 corresponding opportunity costs. Yeah, because we have to make everything consistent. So if computers, sorry. So for the US, exports are computers, imports are iPhones. So exports over imports. So the ratio is equal to 1 in this example. Then we'll also make sure that, right, iPhones is in the denominator while computers are in the numerator. So just make them consistent. So if you come up with 3, then US is not willing to trade. So if like 4,500 computers for 1,500 iPhones, then just like 1 iPhone for 3 computers, then US will disagree to trade, and then there would be no trade. Yeah, so the point is that you have to make sure both countries are willing to trade when you come up with a terms of ratio. Yeah. Okay, Kelly, okay. I will see if that link is still working. As far as I know, I think it is working. Can I just click on directly? Okay, great. Yeah, so this is a pretty old video. Sorry about that. It's about outsourcing. Yeah, so it's 5 minutes and 30 seconds long. And so I would say, how about I just share the slides? I can share my slides with Hawks Learning, and then you may go there, or you could email me. So I'd be very happy to share everything with you. Yeah, it's a very old video, but I think it's a great one though, because this could also help students understand the mercantilism view is wrong. Yeah, because it says trade is a zero-sum game. Yeah. So here yeah, so this explains why US-China trade is a win-win game. Yeah.
And we will be able to send this link out as well, because we will be sending everyone out a recording following this presentation. So we can always get that link from you, Dr. Zinn, and send that out to everyone.
Okay, so now I can see, yeah. Okay, starting with a, okay, great. Yeah. Thank you. So that's why, yeah. So my presentation is actually right, is to communicate with you, and also we learn from each other. And I understand, yeah. People may have different views. But at that moment, that was pretty. That was at the beginning of my talk, so I wasn't really at comparative advantage yet. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I think that one of our attendees, Ishrat, responded and really said exactly what we were all thinking, just saying, thank you so much for your presentation, Dr. Zinn. He explained that he's teaching international trade to his students in a very similar manner as you currently do, starting with the backdrop of mercantilism when Adam Smith published his book, Wealth of Nations, and then move on to comparative advantage. So he said, thank you for sharing your teaching tips with us today. And yes, we all agree. Thank you so much for sharing each of those tips with us today. Carol also added, thank you and nice job. So thank you everyone today.
Oh, thank you so much.
All that great information and feedback. If anyone else has any questions, oh, Ishrat, I apologize for that.
Oh, no problem.
Saying that is she, Ishrat is a she, so I apologize on behalf of that. But thank you all for taking your time today to join us. I will be inputting some more information into the chat before you all go. So if you or any of your fellow instructors are interested in presenting for our Learning and Growing webinar series, please submit your proposals to the Learning and Growing website, which I am going to link in the chat now. That is going to provide you with a few different links. And then also, if you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out to marketing@hawkslearning.com. And again, we will be sending out some more information. So Dr. Zen, we will send out that link and your presentation as well if you would like for us to. But do you have anything else to add?
I think I'm good. Yeah. So thanks for listening. Thanks for attending my webinar.
Wonderful. Well, thank you as well for sharing all that wonderful information with us. And thank you all for attending today. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.